Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's Outdoor Florida webinar. Just a quick note, this session is being recorded and will post to our website next week. We're pleased to welcome Marion Knowles, a Regional Environmental Planner with the South Florida Regional Planning Council. Marion holds master's degrees in urban and regional planning and public administration, and her work focuses on helping communities in Broward, Miami-Dade, and Monroe counties become more resilient. She brings expertise in policy development, grant writing, vulnerability assessments, comprehensive planning, and GIS. After Marion's presentation, we will open the floor to a Q&A session. Feel free to drop your questions into the chat at any time, and we will address them at the end. Marion, you may share your screen.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for the opportunity to share the South Florida Regional Planning Council's Miami-Dade Sun Trails Economic Impact Study. First, I want to talk a little bit about who the South Florida Regional Planning Council is. We're one of 10 regional planning councils throughout the state, and we provide planning technical support to Broward, Miami-Dade, and Monroe County. Some of our services include environmental and resilience planning, economic modeling, land use and growth management, geographic and mapping and geographic information system. So in partnership with the Florida Department of Transportation District 6, we conducted this study with the goal of identifying the economic, health, and property value impacts of sun trails throughout Miami-Dade County. So it's one really comprehensive question with three little breakdowns: the economic, health, and property value impacts. We are following the trails of the statewide study, which was conducted by the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council and presented last year, but it offers a shorter timeline and scaled down approach so that our study can be replicated by other local governments interested in measuring the impact of their trail system. We utilized multiple different methods, including a benefit cost analysis, travel cost method, qualitative surveys, hedonic regression analysis, which is a fancy way of saying we looked at property values, and a health impact assessment to provide a well-rounded understanding of the Miami-Dade Sun Trail System benefits. So a little bit about our project area. Miami-Dade has many sun trails. However, we analyzed 3 to serve as a sample for our study, and we chose these in partnership with the Florida Department of Transportation District 6 based on the information they had available and the trails they really wanted to know the most about. First, we have the Atlantic Greenway. It's a complete 9-mile long trail located on Miami Beach, and it follows the Atlantic coastline. It provides recreational opportunities for both residents and visitors. Many tourists come from out of state or other counties just to visit this trail and walk along Miami Beach. Our second is the Underline. It's 10 miles in length. However, I want to note that at the time of the study, only 3 miles were open to the public. Since then, more segments of the trail have opened, but all of our findings relate to that 3-mile section. And the Underline corridor is both urban and suburban in context, and it includes some of the densest communities in Miami-Dade, such as the city of Miami, and suburban cities such as Coral Gables, South Miami, and the unincorporated Miami-Dade neighborhoods. It also follows Miami-Dade's light rail system called the Metro Rail, so offers unique opportunities to connect to transit as well as recreational benefits. Our last trail is the South Dade Trail. It's the longest and southernmost trail. It's 20 miles in length. It's complete and follows the newly opened Miami-Dade Bus Rapid Transit Corridor, which is, first of all, congratulations to Miami-Dade because it's the first electric bus rapid transit corridor in the United States. The land use context is primarily suburban with agricultural communities in the southernmost section. An important note is that the South Dade Trail will eventually connect to the Biscayne Bay Everglades Trail, which will connect two national parks to one another. So we have a lot of different contexts, a lot of different users. So we got a little taste of every type of trail in Miami-Dade. Next, I want to talk about our economic impacts that we found. So we started our analysis with understanding what are the construction, operation, and maintenance costs over a 25-year planning horizon. So these are our baseline inputs for that benefit cost analysis that I was referring to. We used a 3% discount rate to calculate the net present value, and we found that in gross domestic product, there were $12 million, 123 jobs created, and $10 million in personal income produced by these three trails alone. And we're going to reference this information again when we get into further detail on the benefit cost analysis. So next, we're going to go into the hedonic analysis, which is where we looked at our property value impacts. So once we understood that baseline trail investment, we moved on to how these sun trails are impacting the surrounding properties. We looked at a half-mile area around the trail and separated single-family and multifamily properties. We controlled for various characteristics such as bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, year built, and distance from the trail. We wanted to make sure that we were really isolating the trail's impact and not including any confounding variables. Our goal was to determine what percentage of the existing property value is attributed to just having the trail nearby. So first, for single-family homes, this chart demonstrates the premiums on property value resulting from proximity to the trail. On the Y, we have the premium percentage, and on X is the distance from the trail. Our main finding is that the highest value premiums are between 0 and 0.25 miles. After 0.25 miles, the property value premiums decrease, and the Atlantic Greenway Trail had the highest premium, around 14%, followed by the South Dade Trail between 8 and 10, 9%, and the Underline almost at 6. So the Underline's lower proximity premium is potentially related to the lower level of single-family residence along its corridor and the fact that it's incomplete. So once this trail is finished, we would recommend further analysis to understand the full extent of its impact. Similarly, multifamily properties saw higher value premiums between 0 and 0.25 miles, and the South Dade Trail has fewer multifamily buildings on its corridor, but we still saw a 6% value premium for properties adjacent to the trail. Here we have all the single-family, multifamily properties combined for all of the trails together. So when they're all combined, it reveals to maximize benefits. Single-family homes, there's a sweet spot between 0.15 and 0.30 miles where you're walking distance, but you're not directly on the trail. And in contrast, the multifamily properties can maximize their premiums when they're between 0 and 0.15 miles. So I think this is a great takeaway for any zoning and land use planners that may be here today. We often talk about transit-oriented development, but there's also trail-oriented development. So if you're looking to provide increased recreational benefits for your residents, I would highly recommend looking into co-locating trails with your multifamily buildings, and then maybe saving single family a little offset from the trail itself. So this slide talks about how trail investments are recirculated into the economy through property taxes. The three trails alone contribute $39.5 million annually in estimated tax revenue, which is the equivalent of $900,000 per trail mile. And this is one of my favorite takeaways, since property value impacts are often mentioned for multiple infrastructure types as a potential benefit. But our study and many others across the nation continuously display that trails have a positive effect on property value. So whatever you're investing into that capital improvement plan, expanding your trail network, you're going to recoup those benefits later on. Here are some visualizations of where these value premiums are experienced. So this is the Atlantic Greenway Trail on Miami Beach, and it goes from the northernmost part of the island all the way to the South Beach, where most of our tourism is located. On the left-hand side, you see single-family homes within a half mile, and then on the right is multifamily. And the gaps you see in between each of the charts aren't really because there is no value experience. It's mainly due to the spatial orientation of single family versus multifamily homes. We have a lot of multifamily in the southernmost section and in that middle area right next to Normandy Shores, versus a lot of single family in the northern section of the island. Next is the South Dade Trail, and 20 miles long, so this map is a little deceiving, but it does stretch a very long corridor, and the intensity of the value premiums is much lower for single family homes, but it's dispersed throughout the entirety of the trail. And something important to note is that at that northernmost section for the single family homes, you see a much higher density of value premiums, and that is partially because there's a lot more amenities in that area. So not only are you getting access to the trail, you're also getting access to commercial areas, to walkable environments that residents can use the trail to access. Last, we have the Underline, and once again, I want to note that the Metro Rail stations are on this map because we wanted to understand how they are also playing into the value premiums experienced within the half mile. And we saw pretty high clustering around our Coconut Grove, our Coral Gables communities. And then for multifamily properties to the right, we're very clustered around these like specific segments. So the University of Miami has a lot of multifamily properties, and students are using this trail to access their classes, to access transit, and so forth. So in summary, properties located closer to the trail command higher market values, with impact diminishing beyond a quarter mile. The Atlantic Greenway had the highest single-family proximity premium at 14% of property value, followed by the South Dade Trail at 9% and the Underline at 6%. Multifamily property premiums were highest for the Atlantic Greenway at 15%, followed by the Underline at 10%, and South Dade at 6%. Up to this point, we've really focused on quantitative data, things we could collect from databases and FDOT studies, but now we're going to focus on the qualitative aspect of this. A lot of our information relies on station counts, but station counts aren't available for the Underline since it is a fairly new trail. To bridge that gap in our data, we worked with Friends of the Underline to conduct a trail survey to understand how users are contributing economically to the surrounding neighborhoods. And it provided information for our travel cost method analysis. And here are some of our findings. So the Underline is unique in that 36% of survey users reported walking to the trail, which is almost equal to the 35% that drove. 61% of the Underline trail users live within 5 miles. 77% of the Underline trail users travel less than 30 minutes to the trail, which is very big for South Florida. If you guys live in rural communities, this might seem absurd, but this is big that it's increasing access to local recreation. 24% visited the Underline for recreation, 22% for exercise, and 10% to commute. 60% of trail users made purchases on the trail, averaging between $5 and $15. So as I mentioned previously, 36% of respondents reported walking directly to the trail. That is not a common experience. A lot of people in Miami-Dade will drive directly to the park parking lot. As you can see, 35% are using their personal vehicle still, but the multimodal improvements around the Underline might increase travel by bike and potentially transit, which is only at 10% right now, but still very notable. Right. Okay. So here we have trail-related spending by trail segment. And we also have the annual Strava trips, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But the highest trips recorded was for the Atlantic Greenway, followed by the Underline and the South Day Trail. Based on our user expenditure survey, we found that the trail users contributed $19.3 million through local sales and supported 109 jobs. And most trips were local or same-day trips. Given the high cost of booking a hotel in Miami-Dade, it was more convenient for people to just make a one-day trip. So our health impact assessment focuses on how, in addition to expanding recreational opportunities, how it's actually impacting the health of trail users. It's well documented that increased physical activity reduces the risk of several chronic illnesses ranging from heart disease to diabetes. And to capture the health savings provided to trail users, we created various physical activity scenarios, including an 8% increase in walking, 10% increase in cycling among those who already walk or cycle for transportation, and one scenario that included a 1% increase in walking among the inactive population. These are very subtle increases that translate into major economic savings, with both an 8% and 10% increase in walking and cycling, saving residents around $700 million over a 20-year period. The most substantial impacts involve engaging inactive residents to utilize trails and increase the level of walking by only 1%. So because most Americans live a very sedentary lifestyle in Miami-Dade County involving long commute times, just a 1% increase in walking would contribute to 80 premature deaths avoided, 27 new cases of diabetes prevented, 8 new cases of coronary heart disease prevented, 17 new cases of stroke prevented, and 91 cases of hypertension prevented. And if you're interested in that, I'll drop a link to our report so you can investigate that more. And we did not create this methodology. We used a previous study based on the Mansfield and Gibson 2016 using the value of statistical life. And that value is set by the Federal Department of Transportation. All right, so the final step was determining whether the trail benefits outweighed their costs. So we gathered all of our results, including the lifetime construction maintenance, annual tax revenue, the health savings, user expenditure, and consumer surplus, and bundled it all into one number, which is our benefit cost ratio. And that captures the overall return on investment on each trail. So a BCR above 1 indicates that a project's benefits outweigh its cost, and a BCR below 1 means a project cost does not outweigh its benefits. However, to accurately capture these benefits, we analyzed the BCR per mile of trail, because, as I mentioned previously, we have the Underline at 3 miles and the Southdale Trail at 20. So it wouldn't be fair to compare these different trail lengths and their total BCR. So we did per mile of trail, how do they compare? And the results indicated that for every $1 invested in the Atlantic Greenway, the county receives $2.4 back, and the Underline returns at $1.9, and the Southdale Trail followed with $1.1 back for every dollar invested. So all of the trails indicated a positive return on investment. I briefly mentioned Strava Metro. It's a fitness tracking app with social networking components that allows users to log walking and cycling trips, allowing for users to track metrics such as mileage, elevation gain, and trip duration. And unlike traditional traffic counters, you can also see the origin and destination of trips represented by hexagons. So because of privacy reasons, you can't identify where one individual started and ended at, like an XY coordinate, but it breaks it down into smaller geographic areas grouped together. And what Strava Metro showed us is that commuting via bicycle was highest at the Underline at 24%. And Strava Metro is unique in the sense that it will what is the word? It will auto assign commutes based on the location and destination of the user. So if that individual is traveling to the grocery store or the doctor's office, their software will just note that as a commute when you're downloading the data. I also want to emphasize that this is free if you're using the data for research purposes to advocate for increased bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So this is a resource for other local governments interested in exploring how their infrastructure improvements have benefited the community and where people are coming from. So the Atlantic Greenway and Southdale Trail had similar bicycle commuting rates at 11 and 10%, but most bicycle visitors are still using these trails for recreational purposes. That 24% is big for the Underline Trail. It indicates that people are not just using it for recreation, but it's becoming a part of people's daily lives, their commute, a way for them to access the metro rail and reduce their dependency on single occupancy vehicles. All right, so when we look at the spatial layout of where these bicycle origins are coming from, so these are the little hexagons I was referencing, and the darker red it is means the more trips there are in that specific area. Here we have a half-mile and a mile buffer so that we can see how far people are traveling from. And the Underline had the largest origin perimeter, with trips extending beyond the 1 mile buffer. In downtown Miami and Dadeland North, which is the station at all the way at the south end of the trail, experienced some of the highest trip generations. The Underline's community engagement efforts with the surrounding neighborhoods and proximity to transit encourage trail users to come within, and it's more than just a trail. It's kind of like a community asset where you can meet people. The Underline has a lot of community events. They have yoga, they have gardening opportunities, they do education. So that partially explains why people are coming so far throughout Miami-Dade. You even see individuals coming from Miami Beach, crossing the bridge just to use this amenity. Next, we have the Southdale Trail. And very different from the Underline, we see these origins are clustered within the 1 mile buffer. People are not traveling beyond maybe their house or the commercial shopping plaza. to access the trail. Commercial areas generated more activity, and we believe that improving the pedestrian connections to the surrounding neighborhoods, and when the trail is connected to Biscayne Everglades and Underline, that it may boost trail utilization. Next, we have the Atlantic Greenway, and those trip origins extended outside of Miami Beach into downtown Miami. South Miami Beach has the highest trip generation, with the southernmost point of Miami Beach generating around 960 trips alone in 2024. And South Miami Beach is the very, very most southern part of this map at the south end of the trail. Improving pedestrian connections along the northernmost segment at the very end of the trail and on the bridges connecting to Miami Beach also could boost ridership. So some of the policy implications for our findings are that trails are economically productive. Their return on investment is comparable to many transportation investments, and that the proximity to the trail matters. So economic benefits are concentrated within 0.25 miles of the trail, particularly in dense mixed-use areas. The trail type and context is extremely important. Urban trails with transit adjacency and higher walkability generate broader and deeper premiums than suburban trails. We saw this with both the Atlantic Greenway and the Underline, that their access to other commercial and mixed-use areas and abundance of multifamily and single-family homes greatly improved not only their usage, but also their return on investment, which was shown through the property value benefits. Lastly, in terms of the health impacts, monetized impacts reduce mortality, lower healthcare costs, and reduce spending, increase the economic case for the trails. So with that, I thank you all for allowing me to share this study with you. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know or email us below.
Okay, thank you so much, Marion, for that informative presentation. Like she said, we can open the floor to questions. If you have any questions, you can either unmute yourself or type your question into the chat box. I don't see any in there right now, so give it a couple seconds in case someone's typing. All right, maybe we don't have any questions. That was a very informative presentation, so you probably answered them all. We will go ahead and wrap up for today. A huge thank you to Marion for her insightful presentation and to all of you for joining us today. Next month, we will hear from Carlos Bernhardt, founder of Single Trek Samurai, on bike packing the Florida Divide. If you think of any questions or if you would like to present in a future webinar, please email us at officeofgreenwaysandtrails@floridadep.gov. Thanks again, and we will see you next time. Bye.